Hello and welcome back to my little workspace. Today I'll show you how I make membraned wings for my stop motion puppets. And by membraned wings I mean, for example, bats' wings, like this one, which is perfect for bats and various demons and monsters, or pterodactyl wings, which has a similar but slightly different wing structure. Or you can use this technique to make something that you come up with yourself, something a little bit more unusual. This puppet, for example, is a MEGO, which is an interstellar race invented by H.P. Lovecraft, and they fly with their membraned wings through the ether of space. But you can also use this technique for some other cool stuff, which I will be showing you later. Now, the material I use for the skins of my puppets is ordinary latex rubber. And the good things about latex rubber are it's cheap and it's easy to paint. It sets up very quickly and it's easy to use. The downside is that it has a natural rate of deterioration, which you can see on this puppet, which is also an H.P. Lovecraft creature called a night gaunt. And if you look in my YouTube video list, you'll find the night gaunt video where this guy is animated. And this puppet is about 5 years old by now. And if you look closer at his wings, you can see that the latex skin between his fingers, so to speak, in the wings, the wing membrane between the bones of the wing structure, the latex is actually starting to deteriorate quite badly. It's like a brittle autumn leaf, and I can actually pick small bits from it. And this is mainly my own fault, because this puppet has been standing too close to a window, and the sun rays have actually caused the quick deterioration of this puppet. However, all thin latex skins will go this way. The good news is that you can actually remove the latex membranes and keep the rest of the wing structure or puppet armature, and you can apply new skin between the wing bones, the wing fingers. And you can also use silicone if you prefer that, and silicone is much more flexible and it will last much longer. It's more expensive, and I will not be going into how to use silicone as a material while showing you how I make these wings, but the actual procedure is exactly the same. So the puppet that is in dire need of a pair of wings today is this one. So let's get started. This puppet will become a Lovecraftian monster called the Biyaki, and you can see it animated in my film In the Court of the Yellow King, and on my Patreon page I have a video detailing the whole creation of this puppet. So this creature has 4 legs and will have a pair of bat-like wings attached to its back. I will make the wings separately from the rest of the puppet and then attach them to its body. To create the skeletal structure of the wings, I'm using aluminum wire, which is just slightly over a millimeter thick. I'm afraid I don't know what kind of gauge that would be. I start with bending a single wire into the shape of the whole wing. Then I cut the rest of the wires, bending them into the same shape. This wing will have 4 fingers branching out and carrying the skin or membrane, and together the 4 wires will form strong joints that will bend and stay still without adding any springiness when animated, because you want as little as possible of that. Now, you want the wires to bend only in certain spots, so I'm adding thin but hard metal rods to the places where the wing isn't supposed to bend, where the bones in a skeleton would be. And I bought these rods at a hobby store, and I suspect that they're used for example in floral arrangements, so it would be a good idea to ask about them at a florist shop too. If you can't find any of these rods, you can use thin nails with their heads cut off, or actually long sewing needles like a darning needle. I use crochet yarn to wrap around both the rods and the aluminum wires, pressing the rods down against the wire. You can use any kind of thread for the wrapping, as long as it's strong. When the wrapping is done, I attach the end of the yarn with some contact cement. Any kind of strong glue will work, of course. The finger part of the wing structure is trimmed so it'll look slightly more organic. You can attach rods to these fingers too, and that'll make the fingers only bend exactly where you want them to. But this will bulk up the look of the wings. I decided to not use any rods and just keep check of where I bend the wires when I animate. Of course, if you don't do that throughout your whole animation, you might bend the wire where it shouldn't, but it's a matter of personal preferences. I went for a thinner look for these fingers. To create a bony skeletal look for the fingers, I wrap them with the crochet yarn and build up extra bulk in some spots to imitate the look of bones. Now that you have these imitation bone shapes, you can clearly see where the joints are supposed to be, and if you decided not to add the rods, you now know where to bend the wire when animating and where it shouldn't bend. Make sure you have quite a bit of wire left at the end of each wing, since you will be bending this wire and creating sturdy attachment points for the body of the puppet. These wire ends will also work as handles in a section of our wing making that's coming up in a while. You want some muscle shapes to cover the arm section of your wing, but you don't want to make them too bulky. So here's what I do. I roll sausages of cotton, making them taper out at the ends. Just roll the cotton between your fingers or in the palms of your hands. I add some contact cement to the yarn wrapping of the wings and spread out the glue using a simple foam sponge torn from an old cushion. Then the cotton shapes are pressed down against the yarn to create a bundle of muscles and sinews. The next step is to fix these shapes in place and to compress them a bit more. I soak up some liquid latex in a sponge and press the sponge into the cotton shapes. And as you can hopefully see, the somewhat fluffy cotton muscles are now compressing, becoming lean and accentuated. I'm using a heat gun on a low setting to speed up the drying of the latex. I decided to add a pointy elbow to the wing, so I'm gluing down a bit of cut polyurethane foam, using that contact cement again. Since there will be a lot of bending on that joint, I went with a soft foam. to allow for maximum movement during the animation. To add a more organic look to the muscles, I will be covering them with scaly skin. I'm using a foam sponge to paint tinted latex into a plaster skin texture mold I made many years ago by sculpting the skin texture on a flat piece of clay and casting the plaster over it. The idea here is to create patches of latex skin which you can attach over the cotton muscles and have the skin bits overlap to create a hopefully seamless whole. Again, I'm using that heat gun to speed up the drying, and you can also use a good hairdryer, of course. Always apply talcum powder, baby powder or cornstarch to your latex cast before removing it from the mold, or the shiny latex surface might actually attach to itself if it's folded and stick there. I'm using liquid latex as a bonding agent between the skins and the cotton muscles. You simply apply the latex to the backside of each skin and then press the piece down over the cotton shapes. You also want to cover the finger section of the wing with latex, and you do that by simply sponging it on in 1 or 2 layers. Now to the slightly tricky bit, which is the making of the skin membranes between the fingers and the rest of the wing. You have to line up all parts of the wing, the fingers and the arm section, having them all lining up as perfectly as possible. And I do this simply by eyeing the wing armature, and it usually comes out pretty well. The brown surface you can see in the background here is an old plastic tray. So use something similar which can be moved around easily and that has a slightly shiny surface. I'm rolling long sausages out of a soft hobby clay to create a containment wall. You can use pretty much any clay that's soft enough to handle this way. Each sausage is pressed flat and stuck down onto the tray. Place the wing onto the tray every now and then to make sure that the clay wall goes around it without actually touching any part of the wing. I'm also making sure that the containment wall is pressed down properly without any gaps between the clay and the tray. I have mixed up some soft hobby plaster to the consistency of about whipped cream. It's important that this plaster is soft, so don't use any dental plaster or gypsum cement like Ultracal 30. I'm shaking the tray to smooth out the surface of the plaster, and you will have some air bubbles, but you can simply pop those by pricking them with a pointy tool. So here comes the big moment. You take the wing and actually submerge it halfway down into the plaster, using the end aluminum wires sticking out as a handle. Now you see why the consistency of the plaster needs to be like cream. If it's too thin, your wing will just sink down into it. Now you just leave it there until the plaster has set up. You're likely to spill some plaster over the wing, but you just dip a sponge in water, making it moist, and rub off the excess plaster. Time to add the membranes. I use a graphite pen to draw up reference shapes around the outline of the wing. Within these reference shapes, I add latex using a pipe cleaner and sometimes a pointy tool to reach all spots. When I'm sure that the outlines are properly filled in, I can add more latex using a sponge. Add at least 2 layers of latex over the plaster to make sure the wing membranes will hold up. I am, by the way, using Monster Maker's latex tints to color my latex. The aluminum wire handles might have gotten embedded into the plaster, but just use a sharp tool to cut them free. And again, it's important to dust down the shiny latex surface properly before removing the wing. You then simply and carefully start ripping out the wing from its plaster embedding. Usually you tint the latex the color you want the membranes to be, or don't color the latex at all. But you can paint the membranes at a later stage, and here's how you do that. You mix up some latex and latex tints, preferably with white tint in the mix, and start applying this flexible paint with a sponge to larger areas and with a pipe cleaner to areas where the details are more important. To attach the wings to the puppet body, I'm using thermoplastic or polymorph plastic, which I melted with my heat gun. The armature of the puppet is held together with thermoplastic, so the wings will now become a permanent part of the armature. I just smear on some plastic on the excess aluminum wires, which functioned as handles during the plastering, and press the wings onto the back of the puppet. I buy this thermoplastic as a bag of pellets from eBay and melt chunks of the pellets in boiling water. After fishing out the clumps of pellets with a spoon, I press out the clump against the metal counter in my kitchen until the plaster is a long, flat strip. And for me, it's easier to melt small sections of the plastic with my heat gun, having the plastic in those shapes, than having to boil up the pellets every time I need the plastic. So here's the wing armatures connected to the puppet body, but I also need to attach the wing membranes, which are now only hanging loosely. First I smear on some contact cement on the back of the puppet and then press down some strips of cotton. I then add latex to the cotton using a palette knife or some similar tool, pressing the cotton down over the loose latex flaps. And I'm also repeating the procedure from under the wings. Now you can start padding the rest of the armature with bits of foam, creating muscles, building up bulk and shapes, and of course also covering the whole puppet with patches of latex skin, or clothing or fur or whatever fits your character. Here's the Byaku puppet covered with latex skins. It will later be painted with lighter shades of tinted latex. I am detailing the wings with acrylic airbrush paints, creating veins, splotches, and mottling to make the latex look more organic. And you can certainly also use a good old brush, just as long as your paint will stick to the latex without cracking when it's dry. Here's a different type of flying creature, the pteranodon, a pterodactyl, which has the same body type as a bat. Namely, the front legs are the wings. I use a different approach for attaching latex skins to this type of creature. Bending up the hands, feet, and head, grabbing the puppet by the head, I dip the whole puppet body halfway into the plaster, which means that you have to finish the buildup of the body, including covering it with latex skins, before you submerge the puppet halfway into the plaster. And here's why. It's much easier to attach the wing skins to a smaller body by just letting the body sink into the plaster along with the wing armature. And when the plaster has dried, I repeat the whole procedure as previously described. I draw the wing shapes onto the plaster as a guide, and then I add the latex to create the wing skins. And when a couple of latex layers have set, on with the talcum powder, and I can carefully remove the whole puppet. If your puppet is very dusty from the plaster, just wash it off with a sponge or a cotton ball dipped in water. And, as with the Byaku, some subtle paint job added can't hurt the overall look of your character. You can also use the wing technique for some other application, and here's one. Creating webbed hands, a la the creature from the Black Lagoon. When you have built up your puppet's hands, just like they made the fingers for the Byaku wings, you take a flat piece of clay and press it onto the palm of the hand. I use an oil-based clay, but you can use wax-based, water-based, any clay will do the job. Let the fingers press about halfway into the clay and then paint on the latex with a pointy tool and a pipe cleaner. When the latex has set, remove the clay, which, as in my case, might stick to the latex. If it does, scrape off the clay and use a pipe cleaner dipped in alcohol, acetone, or just water, which I did, to completely clean the latex skins. And there you have a webbed hand. In the same way, you can create fins and other outgrowths for your creatures. Use the clay for these smaller portions of your puppet instead of plaster, and you'll have great results quickly. I'm sure you can come up with even more applications for this particular technique. Now, getting back to this guy, you can see that he actually has holes in his wing membranes, but that's not because of any latex deterioration. I made these holes while casting the wing skins because I wanted to make him look more gnarly and give him some more character. And if you want holes like this in your wings, you simply leave empty spots on the plaster when you apply the latex. And the latex will actually form a small ring all by itself, which actually helps give these holes structure without any risk of rupturing the wing membranes, and you can animate this puppet without any worries about the holes being in your way in any way. So that's all for this time. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you really enjoyed it, please consider donating to my YouTube video channel so I can make more of these videos, and you'll find information about how to do that below this video. So thanks for watching, and see you soon.